There are many examples of slavery, ownership and imprisonment in the wastes of Fallout. However, one thing that we rarely get a look at is an example of it before everything went tits up. Well, today that's exactly what we're going to get. Little Yangtze, a mix between a prisoner of war camp, concentration camp, and forced experimentation. It is where Big MT got many of the specimens for their experiments, Dr. Boris in particular. The camp itself is located towards the northwest portion of Big MT, with 4 possible gates that can provide you entry. However, watch yourself. About 4 Sentry Bots will spawn randomly around the camp and attack you when you get too close. This usually occurs when you have your back turned on where they spawn, so be well equipped if you want to get close to the camp. When you first enter, you will find many of the ghoulified prisoners inside, 4 to be exact. The remnants of the prisoner population still trapped inside the camp. They will either attack you or make a mad dash for the gate. If you look closely, you can see their heads are exploding as they approach it. This sight might seem familiar to you, especially when you get closer and realize they are wearing the same overalls as the ones we wake up with in the Sierra Madre. Well, that is because this camp has somewhat of a joint past with the Sierra Madre, but more on that later. Upon first entering the camp, you can find quite a volume of blood on the outside of one of the tents, the first sign you will get of the horrors that must have taken place here. The mattresses outside the walls may look like just a random pile, until you find the skeletons. Then it becomes apparent what it really is, an escape attempt. Mattresses were taken from all the beds in some of the tents, and piled high against the fence in order to make a high enough mound so that they could climb out. Though from the skeletons and the mattresses and what we learn later, I very much doubt they have much success. The tents themselves are sparse enough, though the prisoners seem to have been given more room than is usually afforded most POWs. One last thing to note is that the mattresses were most likely piled up after the bombs dropped, as there is no way the guards let it get that high no matter how fast the prisoners did it. The toilet area is covered in what I am hoping is radioactive waste, but is probably also full of feces, piss and blood. And oddly enough, no attempt seems to have been made to try and use the outhouses to climb over the fence, which to me would be the far smarter option. The mess hall seems to have been fortified to some degree, though I'm not sure why. They couldn't get out and not many things could try to get in. Perhaps it was as a result of the individual that we will be talking about later in connection to this place. The last tent has a lot more mattresses and pillows in the beds, and even a pillow fort. So either Harold Worthington III made his way to this camp and finally made his pillow fort, or this was a tent that the ghouls actually slept in. One more attempt to pile stuff up to escape seems to have been made, though I doubt it was any more successful than the first. In the centre of the camp, we can find the graveyard, makeshift graves that were most likely the handiwork of the survivors of this prison, as I have no doubt Big MT would let fresh cadavers go to waste if their prisoners were dying. These are the people that did not survive Armageddon and the nuclear fallout that followed, as well as the shenanigans that occurred in Big MT. One of the gravestones has a lot of empty bottles on it, so this could have been the grave of someone important to one of the camp members, and they are drinking to honour or remember them. Any prisoner in proximity to the fence died, but it seems that some may have gotten out. The skeletal remains of several people can be found buried in the ground surrounding the prison, alongside their supposed executioners, the Sentry Bots. This could mean that some of the piling escape attempts were successful, and that they made it just to the outside of the camp, though the Sentry Bots made sure they didn't get much further. Why the bots are just lying in the dirt is unknown. It could be that these remains are from some very old prisoners, ones that escaped even before the event that prevented the others leaving transpired. If that were the case, the bots may have just did their jobs, sitting still and, over time, be by dust, wind, or big mountain shenanigans, shut down and were buried in the dirt. However, some of the prisoners can be found outside the camp up the hill to the left of it. On this hill, we also find the remains of other people, lying dead beside tools of varying descriptions. The 2 prisoners to be found outside the camp are called Prisoner 27 and 34. The name is not random either. This is a nod to the Count of Monte Cristo, as these were the prisoner numbers of the Count and his friend. I am not sure how they escaped the containment area, as they were the same measures that kept the other prisoners in check. The other skeletons here seem to be of people who were executed while they were working. That, combined with the skeletons out front, may mean that they were not part of an escape group. It may be that they were one of the groups carrying out labour, then the other group rioted or tried to escape. As a result, the Sentry Bots killed them all, irregardless of whether they were involved in the riot or still working. The rest of the information of this camp can be found inside and around this watchtower. Ammunition that seems to have been laid out after the war can be found here, but it's the LAER that tells us who was here. Elijah, the disgraced Brotherhood scribe who we encounter in the Sierra Madre, and find signs of here in Big MT. Several radios can also be found here, but the why of that becomes clear when we go inside the watchtower. The inside is covered in electronics in varying states of repair, but the poster in the corner is the first sign we get that he is looking for the Sierra Madre. The poster is of Vera Keyes, who we know plays a pivotal role in the story of the Sierra Madre casino, the casino that Father Elijah now hunts for. On the shelf we can find some deactivated bomb collars, which Elijah used on us and others in the Sierra Madre. This is not the first clue we get that they are here. Indeed, we can find them on 27 and 34, and the exploded remains of the Ghoul prisoners. The explosions now explained by the collars they wore, which, given the proximity to the fence that had occurred, were more likely than not used to keep them in the camp. Based on the dead Ghoul and the collars on the desk, Elijah seems to have been trying to reverse engineer them, and from our encounter with him, he was successful. Next, we have the terminal entries that help shed some light on both his actions and some history of the camp. The first entry tells us that not only were the government providing funding to Big MT, which we knew before, but also prisoners. It goes on to say that they beat the prisoners with the nightsticks to get obedience, and that they were Chinese infiltrators, which in all likelihood is a load of fucking bollocks, and they were just Asian people living in America when all this shit kicked off. The next entry shows us the prisoners did seem to have some sort of order, and that a representative spoke with the guards about a hungry ghost taking people. This was more likely than not one of the Big MT robots taking the prisoners away for experimentation, and only doing it at night to avoid a riot. It's then hinted to us that the brains for the robots are coming from the prisoners. The third prison camp entry informs us that the guards are having trouble keeping the prisoners in line, and we learn of escape attempts, which once again could explain some of the skeletons we find. The next few sentences reveal everything we need to know. The collars that are put on us in the Sierra Madre were made here, in Big MT. The total pacification collars were tested on the prisoners, and used to keep them in the camp. For the most part, it seems to have worked. Also, I want to point out that this was once again another invention that literally made our lives a fucking hell that came from Big MT. Just saying. The next one is the first we see from Elijah here. He mentions Chinese citizens, which can mean he too thinks all the stuff about infiltrators is a load of shite. He then goes on to say that the inhabitants of the camp were turned to ghouls and the collars kept them in there. He goes about trying to deconstruct them, and then says the local robots may spot him, which may refer to the robots we see half buried outside, which means that they may have turned out that way because of him. His next entry gives us an explanation of why he wishes to go to the Sierra Madre. Ulysses told him of it, and he goes about trying to track down the radio signal, which would explain all the radio equipment in here and outside. Then he mentions the holograms and dispensers, which, as we learn later, is what interested him so much. His fourth entry tells us that he found a way to turn the collars off, though he killed some ghouls in the process. He says he took them from the camp, which could explain the barricades we saw in the eating area, which may have been them trying to keep him out. He makes a correction to this log in the next one, stating that he sees a glint in the building next to the camp. He doesn't think it's the courier. He is of course right, and it was not. It was Christine Royce, and we can find her sniper rifle here. We find entries elsewhere in Big MT, which I will divulge a bit of here because it is relevant. Apparently there was a robot attack and Christine was taken and Elijah escaped, which once again may explain the wrecked Sentry Bots. One final thing to note is that the speakers around the camp are emitting a very quiet signal from the Sierra Madre. It seems that Elijah made an attempt to reroute it through the camp's systems in order to better understand it, though even with volume turned up, it is still quite hard to hear. So that is the story of Little Yangtze, an internment camp and also a holding pen for experiment subjects. They were exposed to violence by the guards and twisted experimentations by the scientists of Big MT. Then, they were strapped with slave collars to prevent them from escaping, and it worked. All this time later, and only a handful of them are left, turned into ghouls by the radiation that nuclear war created. Based on the graves found within, we can assume that many others must have survived for some time as well, before they too died. Two escaped, though beyond being an interesting encounter, I have no idea how. Perhaps it was Elijah. After arriving here, he sought a way to find the Sierra Madre, and took an interest in the slave collars that, after some failed attempts, he finally removed. Perhaps those two ghouls were his successes. Eventually, an attack caused him to flee, and also cost Christine Royce her freedom. We, however, would not encounter them here, but in the haunted streets of the Sierra Madre, and we wouldn't face the courier for some time after that. All that is left are the ghoul prisoners, doomed to either stay in this camp until they waste away, or choose death on their own terms, by trying to leave. The story of the cruel and unjust treatment of people caught up in the frenzy of war, and also the start of an old man's obsession with the cursed place. If you enjoy my look into it and want to see more of my content, check out my playlist to see if there are any more suggestions on Fallout that you have, and I may have answered. Any support in spreading the word of this channel is greatly appreciated, as Fallout 4 is just around the corner. If you do want to support me and get regular updates, subscribe. Any suggestions or feedback for this episode should be left either in the comment below or in my subreddit, the thenthapple, which is linked in the description. Follow me on Twitter or Facebook to get regular channel updates and to talk to me or have a wee chat. If you want to get in contact with me regarding business, message me here on YouTube or on my Twitter, and I will get back to you as soon as possible. I hope you did enjoy this episode, and I hope to see you in the next one. Until then, goodbye.